Podcast Talk.
Learn English naturally.
It's never too late. People always think change is something you do when you're young. Like if you didn't start early enough, you somehow missed your chance. But that idea is mostly fear pretending to be logic. We compare ourselves to timelines that aren't even real. Social media makes it look like everyone figured life out by 30. And if you're not there yet, you start thinking you're already late. But late only exists if life is a race, and it's not. It's more like a series of moments where you finally decide to listen to yourself. And that decision doesn't care about your age. It only cares about whether you're honest enough to admit what you actually want.
Yeah, I felt that really strongly last year. I kept telling myself I was stuck because I'd already chosen my path. Job, routine, habits, everything felt locked in. And I thought changing meant throwing my whole life away. But real change wasn't dramatic at all. It started with noticing how tired I was of pretending I was fine. Not tired physically, tired mentally. Tired of waking up and already waiting for the day to end. That's when I realized it wasn't too late. It was just the first time I was paying attention.
I think a lot of people confuse too late with too uncomfortable because starting again feels awkward. You feel like a beginner, like everyone else is ahead of you. But being a beginner is actually a sign of growth. It means you're finally doing something new instead of repeating old patterns. And most people don't fail because they start late. They fail because they keep waiting for the perfect moment, a moment where they feel confident, ready, and fearless. But that moment almost never comes. You just move forward while still being scared.
That's true. What is? I used to think confidence comes before action. Like one day I'd wake up feeling different, more motivated, more certain, more ready. But it didn't work that way at all. Confidence came after I took small, uncomfortable steps. Sending one message I was afraid to send. Saying no to something I didn't want anymore. Trying something new without telling anyone about it. Those tiny choices changed how I saw myself. Not because they were big, but because they were honest.
And that's why it's never really about time. It's about attention, where you place it, what you keep ignoring, what you keep postponing. People think changing your life means reinventing everything, but most of the time it means stopping what's quietly draining you, letting go of habits that don't match who you are anymore, allowing yourself to want something different without guilt, and trusting that growth doesn't expire. It doesn't have a deadline. It only needs one moment where you decide to take yourself seriously.
I also think we underestimate how much we change without noticing. We imagine change as a single big decision, like flipping a switch. But in reality, it's a slow internal shift. You start getting bored with things that excite you. Conversations feel repetitive. Goals that once felt important suddenly feel empty. And instead of asking, what's wrong with me? Maybe the real question is, what is trying to grow inside me right now? Because discomfort is often not a problem. It's a signal that your current life is smaller than your current self. And that's not failure, kasete. That's evolution.
That's such a good way to put it. Evolution instead of crisis. Most people only allow themselves to change when they hit rock bottom, when something breaks, when they're forced to. But what if you didn't wait for pain to give you permission? What if you allowed yourself to change simply because you've changed? No dramatic story, no trauma, no big explanation. Just a quiet realization that the old version of you did its job, and now there's space for a new one. Not better, not worse, just more honest.
I think that's what scares people the most. Not failing, it is- but admitting they've outgrown something, a job, a relationship, a dream. Because once you admit it, you can't pretend anymore. You can't hide behind this is just how it is. You have to face the question, if I'm not this person anymore, then who am I? And that question feels dangerous. But it's also the most alive question you can ask. It means you're not stuck. Hey, it means you're standing at the edge of something new, even if you don't see it clearly yet.
You know what's funny, Jake? People always ask me, how did you know it was time to change? And I never know how to answer because there was no moment, no breakdown, no drama. Just one random Tuesday when I realized I was tired, you were sad not physically, but mentally. Tired of repeating the same conversations, tired of explaining the same choices, tired of pretending I cared about things I didn't care about anymore. And I remember thinking, this life isn't bad, but it's not mine anymore. That was the scariest part. Not that something was wrong, but that something felt finished.
Yeah, I had the same thing with my job. Everyone thought I was crazy. Good salary, stable, no problems. But every Sunday night, I felt this heavy feeling in my chest. Like my body already knew the answer and my brain was still negotiating. And I kept telling myself, don't be dramatic, Jake. This is normal. But normal started to feel like slow suffocation. Not pain, just quiet shrinking. And that's harder to explain to people because there's no clear reason. Just a feeling that you're living on the autopilot.
Exactly. And the worst part is when people say, but you should be grateful, as if gratitude cancels dissatisfaction. You can be grateful and still want more. You can appreciate what you have and still admit it's not aligned anymore. I think many people stay in old lives because they're scared to look ungrateful. So they stay polite, quiet, reasonable, and goodbye slowly disconnecting from themselves, and no one sees it because on the outside, everything looks fine.
That's such a real point. We're taught that wanting change means you're spoiled or unrealistic. But sometimes change isn't about wanting more. It's about wanting different. More meaning, more honesty, more space to breathe. And when you ignore that for too long, you don't explode. You fade. You become less curious, less excited, less present. And one day you wake up and realize you've been surviving your own life instead of actually living it.
I love how you said that. Surviving your own life. That hits. Man, because I think many people are doing that right now. Scrolling, working, answering messages, filling time, but not really choosing anything, just reacting. And the sad part is, from the outside, it looks productive, but on the inside, it feels empty. Like you're busy, but not moving. And that's such a quiet kind of exhaustion, the kind that doesn't let you rest, even when you stop.
Yeah, and maybe that's why the phrase, it's never too late matters. Not because we're running out of time, but because we're running on habits, old decisions, old identities, old fears. And at any moment, you can pause and ask, is this still me? Not is this impressive? Not is this a save? But is this honest? That one question can change everything, even if nothing changes immediately. because once you ask it, you can't unsee the answer.
You know what I realized recently, Jake? Most people think change starts with confidence, like you suddenly wake up brave. But for me, it started with confusion. I didn't know what I wanted. I just knew I couldn't stay in the same place emotionally. And that feeling is so uncomfortable because there's no clear direction. You're not moving forward yet, but you're already detached from the past. So you feel lost but also strangely honest. Like you finally admit, I don't know who I'm becoming, but I know who I'm not anymore. And that's a very lonely space to be in because no one can walk it for you.
Yeah, and that space is where most people panic. They want fast answers, new goals, new plans, new identities. But I think that middle phase is important, the not knowing, because it forces you to listen instead of perform. When I left my old routine, I felt useless for a while. No clear label, no achievement, just silence. And in that silence, I started noticing what actually made me feel alive again. Not what looked good, not what sounded impressive, just what felt real when nobody was watching.
That's so true. I remember being scared of that silence. I kept filling it with podcasts, social media, conversations, anything to avoid being alone with my thoughts. But once I finally slowed down, I noticed patterns, like how I always felt more tired after certain people, how some conversations drain me instead of inspiring me, how I said yes automatically, even when I wanted to say no. And I realized I wasn't tired from doing too much. I was tired from doing things that didn't match me anymore.
And that's such a powerful insight because it changes the whole question. It's no longer, how can I be more productive? It becomes, what deserves my energy? And that's uncomfortable because it means disappointing people, saying no, letting go of versions of yourself that others liked. But it also feels like finally standing in your own life, not as a character or not as a role, but as a person who chooses, even if the choices are small at first.
Exactly. And I think many people stay stuck because they wait for a perfect moment. More money, more time, more certainty. But life rarely gives you a clean signal. It just gives you feelings. Subtle discomfort, repeating thoughts, that quiet voice saying, something needs to change. And the real courage isn't quitting everything, it's listening, not ignoring yourself anymore, even when the answer is inconvenient, even when it scares you.
Yeah, and maybe that's the real message. It's never too late to start listening, not to trends, not to pressure, but to your own inner reactions. What excites you? What drains you? What feels forced? What feels natural? Because the moment you notice those things, you're already changing. Right, even if your life looks the same on the outside, on the inside, something has shifted. And that's usually where every real transformation begins.
You know what's funny, Jake? When people say, I want a new life, they usually imagine a new city, a new job, a new relationship, something external. But most of the time, what really needs to change is internal. The way you talk to yourself, the expectations you carry, the stories you keep repeating about who you are. I used to think I needed a big dramatic decision, but what I actually needed was to stop lying to myself about being fine. I wasn't broken. I was just tired of pretending that my old version still fit me. And that realization was quiet, not cinematic. Just a slow, honest feeling that said, I'm allowed to grow, even if nothing is wrong.
Yeah, and that's such a mature realization because it removes the drama. It's not about escaping, it's about evolving. I think a lot of people feel guilty for wanting more, like they're ungrateful. But wanting growth doesn't mean you hate your life. It means you respect yourself enough to listen when something feels outdated. I had a moment like that with my career. Nothing terrible happened. I just felt emotionally disconnected from what I was doing. And instead of forcing motivation, I asked myself, if I met my younger self today, would I recommend this life? That question changed everything.
That question is actually brutal because it cuts through all the excuses. And I think that's why many people avoid it. It's easier to stay busy than to stay honest. Busy feels productive. Honesty feels risky because once you admit the truth, you can't unsee it. You start noticing how often you're on autopilot, how many decisions are based on fear, not desire. How many days feel identical, not because life is boring, but because you stopped choosing consciously? And that's when you realize change doesn't start with action, it starts with awareness.
And awareness can be uncomfortable because it makes you responsible. You can't blame circumstances as easily. You start seeing where you stay out of comfort, where you avoid discomfort, where you delay important conversations. I remember realizing that I wasn't actually too busy. I was just avoiding a few hard decisions, so I filled my time with safe activities, scrolling, planning, talking about change instead of making it. And once I noticed that pattern, I couldn't unnotice it. That was the real turning point.
Exactly. And I think that's why this topic resonates with so many people, because deep down, most of us already know. We feel it in small moments, on Sunday evenings, on quiet mornings, when we ask ourselves, is this really it? Not in a dramatic way, just a gentle discomfort. And maybe the message isn't change everything. Maybe it's simply pay attention to your energy, to your emotions, to what feels heavy. Because sometimes the bravest thing isn't quitting your life, it's finally listening to it.
You know, Emma, something I noticed about myself is that I used to wait for perfect timing. Like I told myself, I'll change when I'm more confident, when I have more money, when I'm less tired. Uh-huh. But the truth is, perfect timing never shows up. Life doesn't suddenly get quiet and give you a green light. It stays messy. It stays loud. And at some point, you realize that waiting for comfort is just another way of staying stuck. I think I delayed so many decisions not because I wasn't ready to say, hey, but because I was scared to feel uncertain. Uncertainty feels like failure, even when it's actually growth.
Yes, and we romanticize clarity so much. We think one day we'll wake up and everything will feel obvious. But most real changes feel confusing, messy, even boring. There's no big moment where you say, now I'm brave. You just get tired of feeling disconnected, tired of explaining your life instead of living it. And I think many people mistake discomfort for danger. They feel uncomfortable and assume something is wrong. But sometimes discomfort is just your intuition waking up, not screaming, just gently saying, this chapter is ending.
That's such a good way to describe it. Intuition waking up. I had that with relationships too. Not toxic, not dramatic, just empty. Like we were playing roles instead of actually meeting each other. And for a long time, I told myself, this is fine, this is stable, this is adult. But deep down, I felt lonely inside something that looked good from the outside. And leaving wasn't about finding someone better. It was about finding myself again. because I realized I was shrinking to stay comfortable. And that's a quiet kind of loss.
Wow, that hits. Shrinking to stay comfortable is something so many people do without noticing. They silence parts of themselves, their curiosity, their dreams, their opinions, just to fit into a life that feels acceptable, and that they wonder why they feel numb, why nothing excites them, why even good things feel empty. But numbness isn't laziness, it's often emotional exhaustion from pretending, from adapting, from not being honest with what you really want.
And the crazy thing is, most people don't need a new life. They need a more honest one. One where they stop performing, stop comparing, stop measuring their worth by productivity or approval. Because real growth isn't loud, it's subtle. It's choosing yourself in small ways, saying no when you used to say yes, being quiet when you used to over explain, listening to your body instead of forcing your mind, and maybe it's never too late. Doesn't mean starting over. It means finally starting truthfully.
I think what I want people to take from this is that change doesn't have to look dramatic to be real. You don't need to quit everything, move countries, or reinvent yourself overnight. Sometimes the biggest shift is internal. It's allowing yourself to admit that something feels off. It's giving yourself permission to grow without needing your crisis, because life isn't a movie. There's no perfect moment where everything suddenly makes sense. There's just you, right now, noticing how you feel. And that's already powerful. So if you're listening to this and something inside you feels familiar, maybe that's your sign. Not that you need to rush, not that you need to panic, but that you're allowed to ask yourself, is this still the life I want to be living? And if the answer is, I'm not sure, that's not a problem, that's the beginning. And if you're on this journey too, we're really glad you're here with us. Don't forget to subscribe to OffScript English and tell us in the comments what kind of topics you'd like us to talk about next. Because these conversations only matter if they feel real to you, and you deserve a life that actually feels like yours.